I guess the soundbite of this definition is that an AI native is not a checkbox. I just checked it, right? It's a fabric on how you run your business, and it has a flow. Welcome to the Generation AI podcast, where we demystify artificial intelligence in higher education and beyond. I'm your host, JC Bonilla, joined by my friend, CEO, and I would say co-host, Ardis Kadiu. How you doing, pal?
Hey, friend. How's it going?
Very good, my friend. Happy Friday. I have not seen you this week. Where you been? You've been like busy. Where have you been this week, huh?
I've been traveling a little bit. I was in Boston at a CEO conference, and I spent
Boston.
that's right. Yeah. My wife will probably kill me because I was actually in Fenway. And the event
Oh.
was in Fenway, but I was it was a
Family's
good
not allowed to do any Red Sox stuff. Forbidden.
right, exactly.
Yeah. They cast you out of the fam.
That's right. That's right. So, besides that, it was an interesting 2 days, and got to spend a lot of time with other CEOs, about 100 CEOs in there of SaaS businesses, and took a lot of really interesting insights. There's some really interesting conversations and talks, and then the theme of most of the theme and the discussions was like how AI is really disrupting and disrupting the SaaS business, and how AI adoption and AI native and AI first is top of mind for kind of this acceleration there. And that's kind of what we're going to talk a little bit about today. We're going to talk about kind of what that means, how that how the new type of businesses and how the speed is becoming kind of this competitive moat on this AI native companies that don't have a lot of the baggage of prior SaaS businesses. But before we do that, this has been a really, really interesting week, right? There's been WWDC, the Apple Developer Conference, happened on Monday. We have some really interesting drops from OpenAI around their models, with the O3 Pro model
Mm-hmm.
dropping this week as well. And the pricing as well, right? So pricing got released there. And then also Meta is kind of making some really interesting acquisitions as well to kind of scale their AI and doubling down. So I just wanted to cover those few news items first, and then we can kind of jump into the main topic of the
Yes.
episode.
Let's do
Have
that.
you been
Well,
keeping up with WWDC at all, or what Apple announced?
sure, right? So, always an interesting one, and continues to disappoint Apple when all things AI for me. I mean, that's the summary of a product company who was the darling of all things technology, and JC Bonilla is a big, Apple user, all things Apple. Yeah, continues to basically let me down on their advancement and integration of AI. So as we relate this conversation, they're not coming across as AI native or AI first. The least of that for me. You?
Yeah, and that was very disappointing as well. Like, they have missed the opportunity now. Last year, they introduced what they called Apple Intelligence, because they have to be different. So they introduced AI as Apple Intelligence, with some integrations to ChatGPT and Genmoji and a few other things. But the big thing around, Apple, they were the first ones to introduce the voice agents or voice assistants with Siri. And right now, that project has failed internally, and there's delays after delays, and you're seeing it in kind of the introduction of, or the lack thereof introduction of that particular
Right.
feature on. It's just not there, right? And they introduced some really interesting stuff, a new revamped UI. They introduced a few, kind of expansions of the AI in a couple of different areas. The big change that they made was also just renaming their OS, or so rather than iOS 18 or 19, they just went to years now. So, it can be a little less confusing. So iOS 25 rather than iOS 19. But yeah, I mean, their new UI glass or UI design, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think that's something that we'll have to wait and see. But it clearly illustrated the lack of kind of AI leadership internally at Apple, and how a company that had the biggest market cap in the world is now funneling AI, because it's not just about having the resources, it's about like having the talent and having the leadership and kind of having that vision of what you can build. So it's really interesting. Like that's part of this conversation that we'll have today on how companies can. It's not about the resources, right? In this AI speed in the world where we live in. Pivoting on that, did you see the news on, well, obviously you saw the news on Meta acquiring Scale AI,
Yeah.
and just some of the details around that. What do you think?
So what I think is, strategic plays of integration and biotechnology usually solve a problem, and it's very clear to me that the problem that we're seeing through reorganizations, acquisition of this, right, is they're going for the mega AI research play here, and it's a reflection of the open source, the Llama product not delivering there, right? I also understand as this information leaks, right? So Scale AI, right? It's just a big reorganization that is happening there on all things, and the team kind of reports directly into the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg. So what do I think? It's a welcome change because the open source environment, I think, is really, really important for all things LLM and AI. And I think Llama, or in this case Meta, was destined to do that for us in the world. So I think it's a good acquisition. Just too much money, right? And this is where the scale is just I don't understand these numbers, Ardis. It's just gigantic. But the play is interesting to me.
Yeah, so just to give the audience a little bit of a background on this, and we can kind of move very quickly. So Scale AI is a company that generates and builds training data sets for all of these companies. So essentially everybody uses them in order to train their models. So they generate training data for all of the different labs, OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta. Everybody uses them in order to do that. And essentially what Meta is doing, or kind of the looking at it from that perspective, they're paying a really high price for the company, and they are paying a really high price also for the CEO of that company to come in and run, what they're calling their path to super intelligence, or to AGI, so to speak, right? So Meta wants to make a big bet on that as well. And this is kind of a reboot where Mark Zuckerberg is essentially driving and as the founder, driving that urgency in there in order to kind of build that amount of brain power so they can solve that problem. And he's actually buying it rather than than recruiting and building it for internally. So we're gonna a lot of important things come out of this, because Llama is one of the best open source models out there, and we benefit. Everybody benefits from that open source ecosystem. So this is an amazing opportunity for the open source ecosystem, as Meta has been the big proponent of that. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was again OpenAI. They introduced their O3 Pro model, and it's the smartest reasoning model today, which is amazing, right? It really excels at science, education, programming, data analysis, writing, like using tools to search the web, and so on and so forth. And it's available in ChatGPT Pro and through the API as well. And of course, it's going to be rolled out to enterprise and the EDU users again over the next few weeks. But what's even more surprising, not surprising, but what is kind of amazing is OpenAI hit 10 billion in annual recurring revenue.
Oh, I thought you're gonna say they dropped the price 80%. I'm just a cheap used consumer. You're more, as always, you're the visionary here in terms of milestones.
Yeah. It's the 10 billion, one of the fastest companies to get to $10 billion in revenue in the world, which is amazing. And their market cap, or essentially their latest raise, has them at about 350 billion in valuation for the company, which is kind of incredible, right? But to your point, essentially, as they scale, a lot of their revenue has come from ChatGPT, and they're becoming a consumer company. So the bet on building consumer products rather than just building technology and back end stuff is paying off tremendously for them. So the future is about the applications and the technology. Well, you can call it the LLM wrappers or whatever, but it's all about how do you apply to real world problems, which OpenAI has been really good at executing the product vision.
So my reactions to the announcement, that in a way joins a little bit of what Meta is doing, right? Is look, the fact that they can discount at this level, right? Not only is connected to the milestone of usage that they get, right? But it's this value proposition that consumers we take and we pay for it, but also the cost, as we know, the cost of producing these models and sustaining them drops significantly, right? So, as the dominant leader here, right, they just basically continue to create a gap between where everyone is at and the game that they're playing. So everyone is playing checkers or chess, whatever you want to call it. They're playing three-dimensional chess or like, I don't know, Go. It's really, really interesting. And when you pair these artists with the announcement they made about 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe a month, of them going into physical AI in terms of devices, it's just, again, a really interesting investment, and it just makes so much sense. So good for OpenAI, good for us because we benefit from it, and a really well run company that just basically starts to no one is able to catch up with them. So
yeah, exactly, which is great, right? Because what you just said is two things. Is like the cost of these models is going down tremendously. An 80% drop in the cost of running this O3 model, which is one of the most powerful reasoning models. Now we can actually put it into some real world examples here at Element. Like we're using, we weren't using O3 before. We're using like the mini version, and now we can put the O3 because the cost of it is actually cheaper than for the 4.0 model. So, but it's much more powerful, and we can put it into things like application reader and fraud detection, so it can reason a lot better. So this reasoning models can give you really good. So that's been amazing, right? Dropping the cost, and that's been a constant throughout this kind of exploration.
So that's awesome. Let's jump into the conversation today, right? And as we know, it is at the top of our agenda. Through the lens of news, through the lens of the evolution of product, there's this AI native definition emerging, right? The way I'm defining it is that an AI native organization is designed in every feature, process, decision loops with the assumption that AI is always on. What does that mean? Retraining, predicting, optimizations, all these things happen without humans, artists. And this is not just adding a chatbot, but you're rethinking, you're reorganizing, re-architecturing your entire operational model, right? And I guess the soundbite of this definition is that an AI native is not a checkbox. I just checked it, right? It's a fabric on how you run your business, and it has a flow. So what I love to start that conversation is you just attended a 2-day immersion with leaders, CEOs who are building AI native organizations. It's a 2-year time horizon. What does that mean? Probably you cannot be an AI native unless you're AI first. And that's basically the forum that you wear. So can we start talking about and peeling from this definition to where are leaders thinking of, if 2 years ago the AI first movement really started and you're starting to see this AI native? I'll just start with the obvious. Many of us, or everyone, is in a way stuck with this idea of I'm a SaaS company or an iCloud, and also like AI first. So what is this transition, a SaaS to iCloud to AI first, leading towards an AI native organization? So what are you hearing on that journey?
Well, so, it's no surprise that AI is accelerating tremendously, and people who are sitting on the sidelines and even building kind of the traditional business model, everyone from presidents of universities that we've been talking to a lot of them, a lot of VPs and a lot of presidents, And whereas last year they didn't know if like how AI was going to impact their businesses, they're realizing this year that they need to incorporate AI in everything that they do in order to survive, in order to accelerate, because it's here to stay and it's going to widen the gap between the haves and have-nots. And we've talked about this before quite a bit. So this year, the topic of what does an AI first organization look like, and you've seen letters from major CEOs, from the CEO of the most famous one is the CEO of Shopify, where he produced a letter internally to his team saying, we're an AI first company. We're going to always look like we're not going to hire new people. If you can do it with AI, we're going to do it with AI, and we're going to incorporate AI at the DNA of everything that we do in order to kind of scale and to rework processes. And that has, big kind of ripple effects around the industry, and a lot of CEOs and a lot of organizational leaders are looking at AI right now as that accelerant. And they're saying if we don't adopt it and we don't have our organizations use AI or build AI products or transition our product roadmap towards AI, we're going to be left behind and we're not going to be able to capture the value, and competitors are going to move with us. We talked about this before. So that's kind of the impetus for having this discussion. And what we saw, or at least what I saw, there's kind of this, I would like to talk about these three different things, the three different, or, kind of different themes, right? What are those headwinds that companies that like traditional SaaS companies or product companies that are building products in kind of the traditional way, or how businesses or cloud or SaaS products, cloud products have been built over the last 10, 15 years, right? Like how that, like, what are the headwinds for those companies? And of course, a lot of those companies are in our market as well. Like, think about the legacy CRMs, or think about the legacy, even Salesforce made a hard pivot. Like, what are the headwinds for those types of, and a school or an institution might be using that. And then we can talk about kind of how these AI native companies differ and how they win, right? Maybe we're focusing a little bit on that, like how are they different, and how they win in the market. And then talking a little bit about kind of what are the key differentiators for these AI native companies, and maybe we can bring a couple of those lessons in, so we can start thinking about what they're doing really well and what are the differentiators, and then start incorporating them into our into our own organizations and to our own companies, kind of where it makes sense. Does that sound okay? Like, that's basically based on my notes, on kind of the notes that I took.
So SaaS native, or the SaaS journey as headwinds. So what do you mean with this? So unpack that, because SaaS, service, software as a service, right? It alludes to a digital transformation that an industry or a university would have when they have like their cloud, and now they buy all these apps. But as it relates to AI native, what I'm understanding from maybe is like this is like 2 jumps or 3 jumps, right? So it's a compounding effect. So what does that mean to be SaaS native in the headwinds?
Yeah. So when you think about the SaaS, software as a service, so basically you're delivering software to an institution. You're delivering features and functionality, right?
Sure.
And that's the way that, and it's a cloud-based features and functionality, and the business model can be very different. But essentially, you give a tool to an institution or to an organization, and that's what they're selling. And when you think about it, like, yes, we went from on-prem software to SaaS software, where in a lot of cases, it's you're selling the seat, like you're selling a seat for somebody. So it's like you're saying, hey, I'm like Salesforce and so on and so forth. Like, they're selling a seat for you to use that software. And that's changing, right? That's changing how AI, you're not necessarily selling a seat. Like, there's no ability for, like, how do you have a seat for an AI use case where the value is going a little bit higher on that? So when you think about SaaS, the headwinds that a SaaS company is facing today is they're spending a lot of money to kind of achieve, to get customers in the door, right? because a lot of the things that that tool is solving for AI alternatives or a different way of doing this with AI is coming online today or over the last 2 years. So people are finding ways to do that same thing with AI. And, SaaS companies are slowing down, right? The growth is slowing down tremendously. So it takes them a lot of money to acquire new customers. And that's one of the headwinds. The other one is that the organizationally, they're set up to kind of have this linear scale. So SaaS native model really relies on like adding more resources, right? You bring in more salespeople, you bring in more engineers to build more code.
Growth by hiring spikes. The more you put in, the more
Exactly.
you grow. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's how the universities are also set up, or most organizations. It's like it's all about how many humans you have in order to do the output. But if you think about that from an AI native or an AI first, it's like the limiting factor is not the humans. It's actually, how fast you're able to like you can build a lot of code with just one person, and you know what I mean? So that's not the limiting factor anymore. So that's a headwind, right? The linear scaling part. And then look, I mean, there's a huge market saturation. Like we're seeing that the SaaS companies, like they have so much competition today, and the growth rates are, it's very crowded. You think about it everywhere; it's very crowded. So it's like, you have so many different options. So when you go to a customer and you say, well, you're going to move from this CRM to that CRM, it's like, it's not really worth it for me to do that anymore, right? It's like, why would I do that when maybe the feature like you already have the same features as this other platform, or the features vary slightly. So there's no 10x value anymore that gets introduced because there's just so crowded in there.
Well, I mean, I'm combining the first two with I need to grow, right? So I can be linear, and I just basically it's becoming more expensive, right? But the way to compete in this market is that I just basically move my entire product line, remain SaaS, with an AI wrapper. So I just want to make the distinction that when you make your product AI friendly or AI wrappers, you're not AI native or anything like that. You're still the same SaaS company, just kind of added, more linear scaling and more cost in a really saturated market, right? So I'm reacting to everyone is doing AI today, and they're still in the same business model of SaaS, right? Which is linear scaling and growth. So I just want to make that point, right?
But the last thing that I want to say is that it's not true, because there's also the legacy. It's like if you think about legacy systems, SaaS companies, like they often have legacy code bases, and we're seeing that today, JC, as we look at some of our competitors. Like they're not able to move as fast because they have code bases that have been built in the 90s and maybe early 2000s or whatever, and like legacy code bases, like it's really hard to build AI on top of those platforms. So they're going a lot slower. They also have like built-in processes that they can't change very quickly. So it comes back to speed. And in order to move quick and build products in AI and move quicker, like all of this legacy stuff, it essentially prohibits you from moving fast. And as we said, that speed is the moat, and the difference between the two, like everything that you've had today, or this is the way we've always done it. Remember, like that is the definition of legacy. And the more legacy you have, the slower you are, and the slower this transformative adoption, or the adoption of a transformative technology like AI is. So if you have very strong leaders who are, kind of brute forcing and pushing through and like throwing out stuff or the legacy, then it's a lot easier to move things forward. But somebody has to destroy the legacy stuff or devalue it or remove it. And that's not what universities do, right? It's like this is the way we've always done it. It's not like what big corporations or big SaaS companies we deal this in our world. Like we do integrations with the big SISs, and they still have on-prem systems. It's like, can you believe it? In a day and age like today, there's still a server that's running in the closet that has a piece of software that somebody needs to send updates to it and need to maintain the machine and so on in the age of the cloud, right? So it's like, how do you build an AI on top of that? It's crazy. You can't.
Well, that's what I was referring to this as a compounded effort, right? So going from on-prem to digital SaaS and then AI, but not only kind of generative AI, but we're talking about agent-driven AI. That's like 5 jumps in one. So it's a really, it's a leap in terms of digital transformation. So, Ardis,
Exactly.
the punchline on SaaS, what I'm hearing from you as you did this survey, right, is that the model of SaaS has, I would say, it's not that it has its days, it's just that it's really difficult to stand out. And with AI native, companies will start emerging different, right? So let's just contrast that from the sense of growth. If I'm growing linearly, right, and I have to put in the people, the scale, I need to fuel my growth. What is this AI organization looking like in terms of growth?
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing nonlinear growth with this company. So essentially, with less people doing the work, like so much more productivity and work, like there's an exponential growth, but they leverage AI to automate processes, right? They can scale faster, and then they reduce dependency on human resources. Basically, at the core of it, it's reducing dependency on human resources. So the more humans you have, the more the harder it's going to be to scale, and it becomes very linear, like the old model. For example, you use think about Cursor, which is the coding assistant that we've talked about a lot, and the coding agent platform. They scaled to 500 million in annual recurring revenue with minimal headcount. Like the last I checked, they had under 100 people, or when they were 100 million, they had about 20 people. I don't think they maybe have 50, or I don't know how many they have today, but it's really under 100, and it's 500 million in ARR that they've scaled. It's incredible, right? It's like we've talked about this before, where we're seeing how AI allows a small team to deliver tremendous value and to scale really quickly. And the other part is that speed is the moat, right? So speed as a moat is what's different here, right? So that they AI native companies, they build agility into their DNA, which really enables them to kind of move faster. Like the product innovation is faster, and the iteration is, like they can do a lot more iterations and release a lot more stuff, and then they really kind of capitalize on that AI efficiency. When you also look in the go-to-market as well, it's like, well, it's not about building product, but it's also like, how do you go to market as well? Because they're producing things really, really quickly, they're gaining a lot of momentum by the end users loving it. And they're like, hey, I'm getting so much value out of this that I'm going to tell my friends, and then I tell my friends, and then, so on and so forth. So it becomes a multiplier effect because they're delivering so much value, right? Whereas with SaaS native companies today, we said it's very crowded. It's really, really hard to stand out. So if you're a little bit better than your competitor, maybe you use that to your advantage. But when you're AI native, like you're delivering so much value so fast that it becomes kind of a flywheel in itself, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and do you think that the customers are expecting that innovation cycle just because we're getting spoiled by frontier labs that they hit me with something every 2 weeks? So that same pressure is now generalized. So speed as moat, it's not only differentially, it's literally how you stay. Basically, the aspect of relevance, being relevant as a product.
Exactly.
It's all about having this speed. Same.
Exactly. I agree 100%. I think you nailed it. So think about like on the consumer side, like think about like how we treat our students, and we say, hey, universities, you have to change. Your consumer is now experiencing an Amazon-like, like they want an Amazon-like experience. They want personalization. They want 24/7 support, all of these different things. And they're getting spoiled by that. They also want to chat like they're using ChatGPT. So they want the same experience when you go to a school's website and so on and so forth. But that's across all organizations, right? So the consumer can be an institution that's buying technology internally, or it can be an end user. Like the speed and the quality that they're getting used to because of the AI native kind of options that are in the market, it's making them look at their current solutions and their current, the companies that are static and saying, well, I thought this was okay, but looking at this other solution now, this is garbage. Does it? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I totally.
It's an anchoring kind of problem, right?
Yep. Hey, moving us along, I wanted to hear if you have thoughts on this behavior that is growing with the advancements of AI, that it's so embedded in our lives the way SaaS products have not been. SaaS product, when it comes to intelligence, very retrospective. It tells the story what has happened. Sometimes you have predictive models and they go this far, and I'm making a small a sign of small, right? So with AI, now I invited to advise me into how I plan my cooking, how I read stories to my kids. So it's more in our day-to-day outcomes and life. So how are you guys seeing the AI native organization emerging as relates to insights and whatnot?
Yeah, so when you think about the AI native product, they really go beyond the insights, right? So they really offer, like, it becomes more action. It's like rather than just giving you a dashboard, you think about, it's like, I don't want to think through like what my strategy is, just like you said. I just want actions, so prescriptive actions. So which at the end of the day is like you're going one step further and starting to think on, hey, I don't want dashboards, and we talked about this before. I want to know what I need to do next, right? And by the way, that's not it. I also want to know, like, hey, you're telling me what to do next, but I
And do
want
it.
you to do
Yeah.
do exactly. Exactly.
What else is there? We're also kind of running out of time. So anything else on how you see organizations being different?
Yeah, and this is the thing that, the key differentiators for this, what we're seeing right now is AI native companies. They're really, they have an advantage, an inherent advantage, that they're free from overhang of legacy customers, processes, code, and it allows them to kind of adapt and move really quickly from inception. Now we're seeing like a lot of organizations are not AI native, so they need to kind of transform into how to incorporate AI as core to what they're doing. And we've had like what I saw at the conference and the conversations that I'm having with folks is how they're thinking about the scaling and their growth levers, meaning like now they have initiatives on their plate and they're saying, well, do we go ahead and acquire other companies so we can kind of gain more customers, but we're not innovating on AI and we're not incorporating AI into our product, so we're going to be dead in a year. And the recommendations are, forget about the innovation or forget about the incorporation or like the acquisition, component, or like becoming bigger. Focus on the innovation side because you're going to be left behind a lot faster. So the innovation, but and incorporating AI as part of your processes is imperative today because the compounding effect is going to be a lot higher as you move forward. So if I took anything out of this, is AI is really at the core of your growth, no matter if you're a institution, right? To support your students better, to accelerate, to kind of incorporate in your teaching and learning, to have a better student experience, to scale your staff, right? Or in a product-led organization like a SaaS company where you need to invest in product innovation, you need to invest in internal processes, You need to invest in go-to-market to reduce the cost of how you acquire customers, improve R&D, like research and development and product innovation. So it really becomes core to what your focus is, right? And perhaps that was the part that came through with like huge urgency, was drop everything that you're doing and please, please, please start thinking in an AI first way, because time is going to accelerate the difference between the haves and have nots, right? So if you don't start today, the distance, it's not going to be, and you start tomorrow, the distance is not going to be 1 day with your other competitors. It's going to be 2-3 days because they're already ahead, as AI is an accelerant and an exponential grower.
Gotcha. So no doubt that operational efficiencies and will make organizations very distinctive and allow them to compete. And it's core to me, right? As I fully understand how this AI first mentality is. It starts with self. You bring your teams, and you start seeing the change. Speaking of self and human, I just wondering if you can close with, what did you guys talk about more on the human aspect? This has been focused on some of the debriefing that you've been providing is how the software changes and the team gains. But are there any takeaways, recommendations on people, culture that allows a team to go into this AI first process earlier, faster?
Yeah, and that's a tough one. So the way that AI is getting incorporated in organizations, like institutions or even companies, they're building or they're giving certain teams access to AI and saying, hey, this is your thing now, right? It's like, go figure out AI. And that is the wrong way to think about it. And the recommendation really is, it's got to be dispersed across the organization, right? You gotta think about it across, because you're going to have two classes of employees or people: those who are experimenting with AI because you gave it to them to figure it out and moving maybe an initiative forward, and then the rest. And then the rest of the organization is basically going to feel resentment and they're not advancing. So you're going to have kind of a culture clash, so to speak. I don't know if that makes sense to you. If you remember when we were in the NYU days, it's like we had kind of the skunk works teams that were building things. And yes, the projects were great, and sometimes they delivered, sometimes they didn't, but it wasn't on technology that was transformational, right? So it's like, if you have people who are not getting training on AI, who are not getting upskilled, it's bad for their kind of career as well, because you're essentially not allowing them, like their skills, when they go back in the market or when they try to transition out, not only can they not help you to scale things, but also they're looking for, like, they're not going to be as desirable in the marketplace. So if your organization, for example, is not allowing you to kind of experiment and is not being proactive in giving you this projects, AI projects, or how, pushing for that, try to find something else, right? Like, this is not, like, you're going to be left behind. So you got to move to an organization that has a mindset of growth and kind of distributing AI literacy and skills and so on and so forth, throughout the organization, rather than kind of siloing it within one single team.
I mean, this just goes so much more than the resistance towards AI, right? We're just basically just talking about a whole different mindset and how it changes. And this is kind of where we're at. So, look, thanks for doing this summary and this walkthrough. It's really, I think that it's obvious to see how the evolution is upon us, and an AI native journey where an AI first mentality through the operational models, culture experimentation, and all the things that you mentioned, it's literally that path, right? And one of the things that I like that you said before is, you tell me, JC, this is a linear path. It's a gradient, right? And we've spoken about this before, as you chip away on a daily basis, the compounding effect analogies, right? And it's as you're debriefing, my takeaway is that all the things you just mentioned, I, as a leader, I need to be doing this on a daily basis, right? And in the cumulative, we will be AI first and AI native, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. And it's a really, really exciting trajectory as well. So anything for you to wrap up?
No, I mean, this has been top of mind for me, and that's something that we're, thinking about very hard here at Element, and how we do that and how we empower our teams. This conversation is just getting started. So hopefully we've kind of sparked a little bit of urgency, both in the institution side, if you're a leader or if you're working for an organization, on how to think about this as well.
Awesome. So remember, AI native is not a future target. It's the journey that you must start today, and you do it on a daily basis. So Ardis, thank you for this. It's good to have you back, my friend, and more to come.
Till next time, everybody. Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.